Hello, I'm Colin Sanders, and this is the History Books Review, where I read history books and review them. And normally I do this by writing a long, detailed and quite comprehensive script, which I effectively read out. So that's how I make my videos, normally very articulate and clear, but it doesn't have to take a long time. As I have now got a small but perfectly formed band of people who from time to time badger me for new material, I thought I'd try out simply extemporising. So this one is a review of a book I've read, and I'm basically just working from a few notes on some little index cards. So if you see me picking them up and looking at them, you'll know what I'm doing. If you're listening to this on the podcast, that'll be the pauses. The book for this episode is The Holy Roman Empire by Peter Wilson. It's a very good book in the sense that it achieves what the author sets out to achieve very well. It goes through the history of the Holy Roman Empire in rather broad terms, and then it gives you a lot of detail about the legal system, the political systems, the way the economy developed, and some placing of it in the context of European sort of thought and what people at the time thought about the Holy Roman Empire. As is the case with most academic books, he manages to find a few apparently well-known facts to dispute and correct. This is the bugbear of reading academic books, of course. If you don't follow a particular field, you've no idea what the preconceptions are in that area. So having them overturned is something of an anticlimax and takes a lot of words up. But that's not particularly more of a problem with this book than any other book. It's just a drawback of reading history books. But on the whole, even though it's very well written and I can thoroughly recommend it to somebody who wants that kind of book, I hated it. And the reason was it really wasn't the book I was looking for. Because to me, the Holy Roman Empire really does cry out to have its story told. I mean, this is an organisation that was created by Charlemagne, ended by Napoleon, and for 1,000 years in between touched the history of nearly every state in Europe. I mean, it's got to be a great story. Why don't we hear more about it? Because the Holy Roman Empire is very much written out of history. It gets referred to quite often because it always seems to be there, but you very rarely get much in the way of detailed coverage of the Holy Roman Empire itself. I think the reason for that is it just doesn't fit into the kind of narratives we are used to having for our history. I mean, history books for the popular reader tend to be either a national narrative of, to some extent or other, like Simon Sharma's truly dreadful History of Britain, or good books about great personalities. I mean, Adrian Goldsworthy's Julius Caesar is a superb piece of writing, very interesting. Or you have things that are like very in-depth analysis. And here I'm thinking of books like Eric Hobsbawm's set on the 19th century, where he looks into the way the economy develops. And these are all great books. I love them. But the Holy Roman Empire just doesn't fit into any of them. It's not a national narrative. Nobody really feels emotionally tied up with the Holy Roman Empire. There are certainly some great personalities involved with it, but they tend to get taken out and looked at individually. People like the Emperor Barbarossa and the amazing guy called Stupor Monday, who, if I'd scripted this, I would have looked up. I think it was Henry V, was he? I'm not sure. Anyway, as I say, it's extemporised, so you'll have to live with that. So really, the Holy Roman Empire is ignored, and that would sort of be justifiable if it was the kind of anomaly that it's often considered to be. And I think a lot of people tend to think along the lines of the famous quote that Voltaire made about it being neither holy nor Roman nor empire, and in the event, not an interesting story either. And it's sort of usually just simply dismissed as an anachronistic irrelevance. It just happens to always be there. And I wonder if this is actually correct, because maybe the anomaly is European history rather than the Holy Roman Empire. Because if you look at other similar parts of the world, particularly China, they started off developing in a very similar way, but rather than ending up as a set of nation states, as Europe has, it's ended up as a single political entity containing many different national types. They've got different religions, different languages, and they're all recognised to be Chinese, and there is a thing called Chinese, just as there is a thing called European. And why should China be a single political state and Europe not be one? And which is correct. In fact, if you look at other places, for instance, the history of Russia rather resembles China rather more than that of Europe, because that's also become, at least until the fall of the Soviet Union, was very much a multinational state, and even now it's still relatively multinational. There are a lot of Russians in Russia, but there are an awful lot of non-Russians as well. And look at the Middle East. The Middle East is pretty much the opposite way round. A lot of the Middle East speaks Arabic, or has a very common culture with Arabic. That could easily be a single state. And of course, under the Roman Empire and the Ottoman empires, and later on under the Caliphate, it pretty much was a single state. It's only been fractured relatively recently, and I think you'd agree, it's not working out too well, really, is it? One theory that's been put forward is the reason why Europe has developed properly into a set of national states and the other ones haven't is that all three of those areas I've just mentioned actually have something in common. China, the Middle East and Russia were all attacked by Genghis Khan. So it could be that they've got an unnatural level of unity because they've got the common experience of an external threat in the form of barbaric horsemen who might turn up any moment and destroy your civilization. In fact, there was a serious discussion of wiping out the Chinese population to create more grassland for the Mongols' horses at one stage. That sort of experience is probably going to have at least some impact on the way you behave, I would think. And so it could be that the simple chance that the Mongols didn't get past Poland is why Europeans are less united than they might otherwise be. And in fact, there was a stage in European history where literally the Holy Roman Empire, run at the time by the Habsburgs, could have developed into a pan-European national state. Nearly every state in Europe was at some stage ruled by a Habsburg, including Britain. This is something that many British people don't immediately remember, but if you actually look in the details, the reign of Queen Mary was one which we look back on with not much affection because of her persecution of the Protestants, but she was married to Philip of Spain, a Habsburg. Had that continued, Britain could easily have become a common state with Spain and Austria. Put that lot together, add in their New World possessions in North America and South America, that's a pretty substantial state. If that could have held together, that could easily have developed into a state of Europe, and it would probably have been called something along the lines of the Holy Roman Empire. And that fell over in the 6th century. It just didn't quite come off, largely because the French and the Dutch and the English, but largely the French, stopped it from happening. But it's worth considering, towards the end of this period when the Habsburgs were in contention for becoming the rulers of Europe, the Turks actually laid siege to Vienna. And it's one of those interesting stories that comes up, and more or less instinctively, I think everybody in Europe knows which side they're on. You don't want the Turks capturing Vienna. Vienna was the capital of the Eastern Habsburgs at the time. There's something, if they had captured it and then the rest of Europe had pulled together to expel them and recapture Vienna on behalf of the Habsburgs, could that have been the mode by which everybody came together and a single state along the lines of the Russian Empire or the Chinese Empire was established? it doesn't seem anywhere near as unlikely to me looking back on the facts as it seems unlikely looking back on what actually happened. So that's what I really want to read. I want to read a book about the Holy Roman Empire that really puts it in context as a really serious part of European history, a part that ultimately failed and was ultimately destroyed by Napoleon, who was actually destroyed as part of a rather similar project, which was also stopped. But I just think it's just such an interesting bit of imaginative alternative history. A large European state with possessions in most of the Americas would have dominated the world. It would have been technologically ahead, and a lot of the things that happened wouldn't have happened. No First World War, no Second World War. It just seems like that would have been a much better place to live. And I just find it an interesting thing to talk about. If anybody knows of a more lively history of the Holy Roman Empire, which is more along the lines I'm interested in, I'd love to hear about it. But in the meantime, thanks for listening.